Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to help you decide whether Sudden Strike 4 is the right World War II strategy game for you. By the end of this video, you will know what it's like to actually play this game to help you make an informed decision. I'm not a Sudden Strike fanboy, just a strategy fan who took a chance on this game, so I could report back with my findings to you, my fellow generals. First, give me 30 seconds to describe the game in a nutshell. If you're still intrigued after that, we'll go into more detail about how the game plays, the mechanics, and how it compares to other games you may have played. If Company of Heroes had a three-way baby with Gates of Hell Ostfront and Steel Division 2, the outcome would be Sudden Strike 4. The campaign takes you all over Europe as both the Allies and the Axis powers, choosing and upgrading the skills of a general to take you into battle. Tanks are the stars of the show, but you must manage their ammunition and fuel. They're also pretty blind, so using infantry as their eyes and ears is essential. Infantry have skills such as mine laying or grenade throwing, and you can call in airstrikes or scout planes from off the map. You can't call in reinforcements whenever you like, so making the most of what you have is a big part of Sudden Strike 4. The game was released in August 2017, has mostly good reviews, and a variety of DLCs on offer for a reasonable price. The game is brimming with historic accuracy, but in places, realistic combat has been reduced in favour of more enjoyable gameplay. But is Sudden Strike 4 worthy of your time and money today? Before we get into the gameplay mechanics, let's pretend you've just purchased the game and fired it up. Let's see what the game looks like when you first log in. As you can see, the menu looks slick with a friendly message from the devs. There are plenty of options on the left, starting with the campaigns from the base game as Germans, Soviets and Allies, a bit of historic footage because why not? Then they tease us with the campaigns that are locked behind paid-for DLCs, which we'll look at later. We have bonus missions, which are, well, bonus missions, as you can see, multiplayer as standard, and of course a traditional skirmish mode. Basically, there's a lot of content to get your teeth stuck into here, so let's waste no more time by taking a quick look at the graphics and performance before moving on to gameplay mechanics. The game has solid graphics. Although I wouldn't label it as pretty, the game runs incredibly smoothly while looking good doing it. The explosions look awesome. If you're concerned about the performance on your system, I have some good news. There's a good chance Sudden Strike 4 will run well on lower end systems. Just remember to check out those minimum system requirements. With first impressions out of the way, you're most likely going to look for the tutorial. In this game, the tutorial is very brief and just takes you through the basics of selecting units, issuing orders, that sort of thing. Although the tutorial is brief, the UI is so clear and well laid out that a fully comprehensive tutorial would have been a waste of your time, as the learning curve is rather easy for new players to overcome, and some of the more obscure details are introduced as part of later missions and fit well with the story. When speaking to strategy fans, it's obvious to me they either love or hate the World War II setting. The base game is all about the European theatre as a whole, and goes to great lengths to immerse you in the big picture from a general's perspective, but also individual soldiers with fully voiced introductions to missions talking about the battle ahead, their family at home, and how they just want to be enjoying Christmas with their kids. If you want World War II immersion, Sudden Strike 4 has got you covered, and so one of the easiest ways of deciding whether this game is for you is to simply ask yourself, how bothered are you about a World War II setting? But with that said, if you really do enjoy strategy games and are looking for something new, this game does have a lot to offer, even if you aren't that keen on the World War II setting. So let's take a look at the main game mechanics compared with other RTSs before diving into detailed gameplay. The gameplay shares many mechanics with Company of Heroes and Gates of Hell Ostfront. Sudden Strike 4 has more polish than Ostfront, but deeper levels of detail than Company of Heroes, though it sits between those two games and provides a decent balance of both. The army you command will rarely be larger than a handful of tanks and supporting infantry, and calling in scout planes or a devastating bombing run from off the map works well. Keeping your tanks fueled and topped up with ammo are two of the main challenges of the game. You'll find yourself with a front line of tanks engaging the enemy, and as they do that, you can have your supply truck and repair truck sitting back, waiting for a tank to get low on ammo or need repairing, so they can move up to resupply. As tanks sustain damage, they can't regain health, so each shot counts. They can suffer a failure, such as tracks being damaged, preventing them from moving, which a repair vehicle will be able to sort out, but it won't increase their overall health. Before each mission, you can choose a doctrine and associated general. As you progress through the campaign, you earn stars based on your performance that can, in turn, be used to unlock specific skills for the general, which makes a practical difference in your next mission, such as being able to deploy smoke grenades. Several of the campaign missions start with tanks low on fuel, such as the Germans at the Battle of the Bulge, so managing their supplies and scavenging for abandoned supply trucks is an important logistical part of the game at times. As with Ostfront, it's possible to find and use abandoned equipment like field guns, and there are small details such as getting your tank commander to pop his head up out the hatch to extend the tank's vision, or make your infantry go prone for greater protection. Some of the best moments in Sudden Strike 4 are when you need to successfully retreat your units to the other end of the map when they're already low on fuel. The scramble to retreat from an advancing enemy whilst refueling tanks along the way can be a stressful but enjoyable experience. Given the relatively low number of units on the battlefield, you're able to micromanage your tanks and infantry with relative ease thanks to the hotkeys system at the top of the screen, where troops come with pre-assigned numbers on the keyboard but can be easily changed on the fly. If you find your tanks are moving forward and are suddenly flanked, it's very satisfying to use S to stop them moving, W to make the tanks reverse out of trouble, and R to rotate them so their thicker front armour is facing the enemy. Although tanks are the main face of the game, micromanaging infantry is still fun. You can manually throw grenades, plant explosives, and change stances so they can ambush an enemy at your command, but you won't find a detailed cover system for infantry like you do in other World War II games. Having to keep track of fuel and ammo means the micromanagement is more detailed than Company of Heroes, but less so than Ostfront. They are all great World War II games that work in slightly different ways, so it just comes down to personal preference. There is literally no base building in this game. You go into a match with a bunch of tanks and infantry, the campaign might drip feed you reinforcements, and there are ways of reinforcing in the multiplayer, but on the whole, you take a team into the fight, and as the commander, you do what you've got to do. No base, no defenses, just attack, attack, attack. In the campaign, you won't have to worry about an economy at all. I suppose you could argue that's replaced by the need to worry about fuel and ammunition for your tanks and troops. In multiplayer, there are modes where you wait for resources to tick up over time, and eventually you can call in the occasional reinforcement or planes, but as you can probably tell by now, the focus is on fighting and keeping the troops you have alive and the machines you have working. Are you interested so far? In a moment, I'll describe the various game modes this game has to offer, but first, now we've looked at the big picture, let's examine the finer detail of the gameplay mechanics to give you a real feel for what a game of Sudden Strike 4 is actually like. In the single-player campaign, deployment of troops is taken out of your hands almost entirely. It works well with the story though, as you are essentially a commander in charge of a unit or battalion, and you can't magic up new tanks in the middle of a battle. But it is more feasible that during a battle some reinforcements have been dispatched to you, or you've stumbled across an abandoned tank that could be used to your advantage. In particular, it's cool how in multiplayer you can capture a train station and individual tanks can be delivered by train in the middle of a fight, and inevitably there's fierce fighting for control of the train station, so you can be the one to call in reinforcements. Planes are called in from off the map using the F keys. You can't control them, you can only click a spot for them to scout or bomb, and you just let them get on with it. And you can be waiting a very long time indeed for them to reach the target, so timing is everything. Vision is an important consideration in Sudden Strike 4, whereas cover and terrain is not so much outside of remaining hidden. Tanks in particular can't see very far at all and need assistance from their infantry to help them spot the enemy first. Honestly, two tanks can be right next to each other, but still not see anything to shoot at. The game has a strange looking system where tanks and trucks that you can't see are represented by yellow symbols in a circle when they get close enough. At first this looks weird, but when you think about it, it represents your troops being able to hear and identify where a target is, but they just can't see them yet. So I guess it makes sense. If your troops or tanks are in a cornfield or behind a wall, a helpful eye symbol will appear next to them so you know they're hidden. This makes ambushing a very real and fun experience in Sudden Strike 4, as there tends to be a lot of cover on most maps, and as I said, often an enemy tank is right next to you, but until you actually see it, you can't shoot at it. There is a fair amount of RNG, but it's nothing compared to Steel Division 2. Shots do miss or bounce off armour, but for the most part it feels realistic and not too frustrating. Interestingly, small arms fire does 0 damage to tanks, so you won't see a pistol taking out a tank as long as it shoots for long enough. The units themselves look good, the tanks in particular, and there's a lot of variety here with all the big names like the Tiger and Sherman, alongside others that are more niche, such as the British Matilda tank that gave the German Panzers a run for their money when they invaded France. Speaking of which, you can play as France in the skirmish mode, and others such as Italians and Japanese, but they're behind a paid-for DLC. There's a lot of historic accuracy here, which may not quite go to the insane level of details of Steel Division, but it's not far behind. There is an element of learning which gun can penetrate which armor, and it's very satisfying to roll up to a fight with a super heavy tank and seeing your enemy shells ricochet off its thick armor, or flank with a tank destroyer and watch it decimate their big tanks. The sound effects are pretty spot on. I really can't fault the sound of explosions and big guns firing. They sound like they have some real substance behind them. One strange thing I did notice is the German officer speaks with an American accent in the campaign, which was odd, but it's a minor detail in the scheme of things. If you're into your music, I would say Sudden Strike 4 is okay, but not amazing. It does the job and certainly ticks the World War II vibes box. The soundtrack is good, but it's still Hearts of Iron 4 that does it for me in the music department. Zooming is relatively limited. You can't zoom in or out particularly far, but you can rotate the camera, which was a pleasant surprise. It's a shame as it'd be great to get closer to the detailed tank models, but actually playing the game with these zoom levels is absolutely fine. By now you've got a good idea of how the game plays and the basics of the mechanics, so let's examine how the game lets you use all of this in the various game modes. The game has a ton of campaign missions and even more with the DLCs, so if a single-player World War II experience is what you're after, Sudden Strike 4 has to be a serious consideration. The missions vary in length, but there is replayability there, as there's a 3-star system based on how well you perform in that mission, and of course different levels of difficulty for you to attempt. Ultimately, the single-player offering is more comprehensive than the multiplayer. The multiplayer comes in a few different forms, but essentially revolves around the idea of choosing your country, which kind of doctrine you would like to adopt, then getting stuck into the battle. You capture points of interest to accumulate prestige points, and occasionally call in reinforcements. In many ways, it's a battle of attrition as your hulking beasts burn fuel and take damage that they can't fully repair. Taking control of train stations and docks so you can call in reinforcements leads to some epic battles. Ultimately, the multiplayer doesn't blow me away, but it's a fun offering on top of the campaign. I've played this game for a little over 15 hours now, and this is what I would say to somebody considering purchasing this game. Sudden Strike 4 has a way of absorbing you into its campaign, with plenty of narrative before and after each mission to provide context for each historic battle. I found myself Googling the towns and regions these battles took place in, and there's just a lot of effort to immerse you into the experience. The multiplayer offering is pretty solid, but I don't see it replacing Company of Heroes, Ostfront, or Steel Division in that respect. If it's story you're after, and at a very attractive price point, I highly recommend considering Sudden Strike 4. So is there longevity in this game? The key lies in the campaign. There's a good amount of hours to be had in your first playthrough, and some replayability too. Combine that with a decent multiplayer experience, and there's some longevity in the base game. But if I'm honest, I have my eye on the campaign expanding DLCs, as there are several of them at a very attractive price in the sale. Speaking of sales, let's take a look at how much the base game is going to cost you at full price and in the next sale, along with the DLCs. The current full price of the game is $20, £17 and €20, but in the sale you can pick it up for $8, £6.79 or €8, and with the amount of content you get, that's a bloody bargain. Now, with the DLCs, you need to avoid the Battle of Kursk. It's simply a single PvP map, which I'm astonished they're making you pay for. But then we have 3 equally priced DLCs, Road to Dunkirk, Finland Winter Storm, and Africa Desert War, all priced at $10 or $4 in the sale. Road to Dunkirk is only 2 new missions, but the Finland DLC looks quite chunky and has reviewed well, as has the Africa DLC, which is Italians in the desert. Then finally, we have the big boy, the Pacific War, at $20 fully priced or $8 in the sale. It introduces naval warfare and has generally reviewed well, but is that much more expensive. You may want to wait until the sale to pick it up if you enjoy the base game. So let's bring this all together and answer the question, is Sudden Strike 4 worth it for you today? The game is by no means perfect, but it is one of the most refined World War II RTSs on the market that should be considered by any fan of the genre and setting. The learning curve is relatively low, and the level of historic accuracy is impressive. such as when Rommel started using his 88 anti-air guns to destroy enemy tanks, as nothing else would work. If you're looking for a new World War II campaign, you need look no further, and the multiplayer is a nice addition on top of that, but I don't see it replacing the multiplayer of Company of Heroes or Ostfront in its own right. Visually, the game is impressive while maintaining smooth performance throughout, and it does just about everything well. Nothing particularly outstanding, but certainly nothing badly either. It's just a good game, and for the price, I think you're in for a treat. I hope you found this review useful, and if you did, I have plenty of others like it, so feel free to check those out too. See ya.